Why do the mountains look blue? A question that always crossed my mind as a child during my trips between Ujda and Saidia. I would sometimes ask this innocent question, tinged with a bit of silliness, while riding in the white taxi, excited about the journey to the city of Saidia. The golden sun, the refreshing sea, the crispy baguette, and the smell of fried potatoes with a chilled bottle of Coca-Cola. At night, my friends and I would walk back and forth along the main street, as if performing the sa'i between Safa and Marwa. Nothing unusual, people on the right and left chatting and watching those passing in the middle. We spent most of our time eating fast food, wandering around a national fair, showcasing artistic and commercial products, then continued our youthful evenings in video game arcades, talking, cracking jokes, and harshly criticizing others. I was a natural critic, skilled at drawing sarcastic smiles. If I had continued down that path, I might have become a brilliant art critic, not out of arrogance, but from genuine conviction. It seems I've gone off script, just as I used to in writing and philosophy assignments back in middle and high school, when I'd grow bored of the dull, assigned topics. Nostalgia always drags me back to memories of childhood and youth. It seems growing older is inevitable and inescapable. Anyway, back to the taxi story, to the dignified white Mercedes taxi, and to that cosmic mystery that puzzled even the taxi driver, whom I believed at the time could answer any question simply because he was the driver. But the answer would usually come from my family or other passengers, either illogical or complete silence. Despite my young age, I could tell the answer was wrong. Years passed, and with them faded that childlike naivety, until I finally found the answer to that cosmic question, a perfectly reasonable explanation offered by scientists in the field. They say it's due to Rayleigh scattering, named after the British physicist who discovered how light scatters. When light passes through the atmosphere, shorter wavelengths, like blue, scatter more than longer ones, like red. Because of distance and atmospheric haze, more blue light is scattered, making mountains appear blue from afar. That concludes our educational segment. Now, let's get to the adventure. Malaysia, that distant country I never thought I'd visit, but my love for exploration, along with the ease of obtaining a visa, took me there. I arrived in the capital, Kuala Lumpur, after a few simple procedures at the airport. As is well known, Malaysia warmly welcomes tourists and waives entry visas for most Islamic countries. Its people are peaceful, educated, and coexist harmoniously with all religions. The society is made up of native Malays, Indians, and Chinese, united by a common language, English. They live in a land that blends lush green forests with towering skyscrapers and wide roads. As for the weather, it's extremely hot and humid, so much so that even the leaves seem too weary to move. At times, heavy rains pour down, watering the rainforests and cities as if from heavenly waterfalls. Yet, despite the downpour, the temperature remains warm, and all you'll feel is the wetness, unless you're carrying an umbrella or manage to find shelter. The country is very safe, and you won't find much to bother or disrupt your trip. And when it comes to food, rest assured, white rice or biryani will always be present, as if they have a reserved seat at every table. Just like bread in Morocco, the ever-present ambassador of every meal. After spending several days in the capital, I headed to Mount Kinabalu, a city located on the other side of Malaysia. When I arrived at the airport, I was surprised to learn that even Malaysians themselves get their passports stamped if they're not from that state. Each state has its own set of laws. I wasn't very familiar with those details at the time. My mind was entirely focused on one goal: climbing the highest mountain in the country. I left the airport, and the next day I began exploring the island. It was truly a beautiful place, very different from Kuala Lumpur, milder in weather and much quieter, far removed from the noise of traffic and urban pollution. The waters were blue like the sky, and the trees so vibrantly green they felt like paintings come to life. A few days later, I received a call from the mountain trekking agency I had previously contacted. They told me to prepare for the trip in 2 days. As with all my mountain climbs, it was just a regular hike. Nothing too complicated in terms of preparation. I simply wore a good pair of athletic pants over woolen leggings to stay warm, a leather jacket over winter clothes, sturdy boots, and a backpack with water, food, summer clothes, a head covering, and a headlamp. I wasn't exactly an athlete, of course, but I was excited for the adventure. These were my personal preparations. But had I been with a friend or someone under my responsibility, the planning would have been entirely different. That person would be my responsibility, and I'd have to train and advise them thoroughly. If they failed to follow through, I wouldn't be held accountable for them. The day of the trip arrived. The driver called me and sent the location of the minibus. After several WhatsApp messages, I finally found the spot. The minibus was black with 6 seats. Its windows and tires were also black. It honestly looked like a mafia vehicle about to carry out a kidnapping. I got in and found 4 elderly people from South Korea. They weren't wearing masks, so I knew I was in the right place. They were headed to a mountain park. We chatted a little during the ride until we arrived at the park. I had no idea it would be so beautiful. Plants and trees everywhere, with the name of each plant carefully labeled. I didn't have much botanical knowledge, but the driver, who was also a park guide, delighted us with fascinating information. I saw a tree from which rubber is extracted, and the carnivorous plant I had only ever seen on TV. We also saw the largest flower in the world, Rafflesia. It had a foul odor since it feeds on flies and rotting matter, but it was beautiful in appearance and only blooms for a few days each year. I personally classified it as a strange type of mushroom and gave it a nickname, sunken head fungus. I'll leave it at that. I'm no botanist to go diving into scientific and biological classifications. After our short and exciting journey, we arrived at another park dedicated to registering climbers. I said goodbye to the driver and the kind Koreans, then met the mountain guide who led me to the registration office. There, a staff member asked for my passport to record my details, but I didn't have it on me as I hadn't expected it to be needed. Luckily, I had a photo of it on my phone, and she accepted that without any issue. As for the guide, when I first saw him, I was a bit surprised and couldn't help but smile. He looked a lot like the legendary actor Joe Pesci in both height and facial features. A middle-aged man, quiet and reserved. Had he been the driver instead, I might have been convinced we were on a mission far more suspicious than mountain climbing. We started walking to the main mountain lodge, where I rested for a bit before having dinner. Rice and chicken, apparently the ever-present duo in this part of the world. I didn't find the taste of Asian cuisine particularly impressive, even if many people love it. It didn't stir anything in me. And how could it when I'm the son of Moroccan cuisine, unmatched in flavor and richness? In the large dining hall, a number of foreign climbers had gathered, each preparing their gear as if they were about to launch a military operation, not a hike in nature. After finishing my meal, I looked up in search of my country's flag among the many flags strung around the kitchen, but I couldn't find it. I felt a twinge of disappointment. I approached one of the food servers and asked if he could, when possible, add Morocco's flag to the collection. What made me even sadder was that I hadn't brought one with me from home to raise high at the summit. I remembered how I had searched for it in Indonesia when I climbed Mount Batur, looking through hotels and shops, hoping to find a Moroccan flag. But to no avail. It was nowhere to be found. As I walked out of the kitchen, I suddenly saw the flag before me. I smiled. It was as if it had been waiting for me. Maybe it wasn't a fan of Asian food either, and had stepped outside to enjoy the cool mountain air. I also caught sight of a mailbox, which sparked my curiosity. I asked myself, Who writes letters at this altitude? And to whom are they sent? Are they love letters exchanged between the clouds and the mountain? I had no idea, and truthfully, I didn't want to know. After that, I made my way to the room to sleep, since I had to wake up before dawn for breakfast and then begin the ascent. Inside the room, I found two people already fast asleep, as if the mountain itself had weighed down their eyelids. I quietly climbed a small ladder to my upper bunk, careful not to wake anyone. Then I set the alarm on my phone, knowing full well that sleep wouldn't be deep and rest wouldn't be complete. Still, I embraced that moment of stillness. It was a cold night and rain was pouring down, but its sound was soothing. After sleeping for 5 hours, maybe less, I woke up before my alarm went off. I was fully awake and alert, as if my mind had been pre-programmed to rise at dawn. But I also knew the exhaustion would hit me hard by afternoon. The two other climbers were already gone by the time I woke up. They'd risen before me. I got dressed, grabbed my backpack, and headed to the kitchen for breakfast. There, I greeted Joe Pesci, my quiet guide, who was sitting peacefully, sipping his hot coffee. We exchanged a brief look before he broke the silence with a calm voice. "Are you ready?" I replied. "Yes, I am." And with that, after finishing our breakfast, we took our first step toward the summit of the mountain. The guide walked ahead of me in the pitch-black night, and I followed him cautiously, trying not to slip on the slick rocks. Rain was pouring relentlessly, piercing my face like needles, while fierce winds blew from the left, almost trying to hurl me down the mountainside. I hadn't anticipated that the weather would be our greatest enemy. For someone like me, a hobbyist climber, the mountain's difficulty lay in its harsh weather, the jagged rocks, the steep incline, and now all these challenges had combined at once. To make matters worse, raindrops kept collecting on my glasses, forcing me to wipe them every few minutes, as if visibility wasn't difficult enough already. I couldn't take it anymore. I wanted to turn back. I asked the guide if we could return, since the rain was making it nearly impossible to see. He replied that it wasn't possible. The climb had strict, scheduled timing. So I took off my glasses to stop the water from collecting, and to my surprise, the walk became easier. I kept walking behind the guide carefully. The terrain here was nothing like anything I'd ever faced before. It was by far the toughest climb I'd ever done. As we continued upward, the wind suddenly shifted, as if looking for a weak spot to exploit and bring us down. It came from the front this time, so strong that it lifted the guide a few centimeters off the ground, then pushed him backward like a kite. I watched him, stunned, and instinctively, my hand shot out and grabbed him just before he could take off to Kuala Lumpur. Strangely, in the middle of all this danger, I couldn't help but smile, and I nearly burst out laughing. That moment of absurdity completely shifted my mood, which had been drained by the climb. We almost lost Joe Pesci for a moment there. I reassured the guide, told him to be careful, and it felt like our roles had reversed. Still, I didn't want to continue ahead of him, as I usually did. I held back out of respect, even though I could have just followed the other foreign climbers ahead of us. But it was the wiser decision. This mountain was no joke, and as the saying goes, the people of Mecca know its mountain paths best. I wasn't about to take risks in this cold and shadowy climb. Speaking of Mecca, that reminded me of climbing Mount Al-Noor and Mount Thor, the two sacred mountains that carry within them a long legacy of faith and endurance. The ascent to Mount Al-Noor, where the Cave of Hira is located, was a deeply awe-inspiring experience. Every step I took felt like a walk back through time, into that profound historical moment of solitude and reflection that the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, experienced in that very place. The climb began gently, thanks to the staircase built into the path. But even then, the area was filled with people from every race, color, and age, all climbing with the same sacred goal: to reach the Cave of Hira at the summit. It felt like we were all walking one endless path, surrounded by a sense of peace and spiritual reflection. As I was climbing, I met a Turkish man in his 60s. His face was cheerful, and his smile was full of life. He had a light mustache. Not all Turks have that exaggerated Pringles mustache we've been made to expect by certain silly TV programs. They haven't been frozen in the stereotype that the media tried to paint for them before World War II. He was holding a cold orange, which he kindly offered to me at just the right time. The heat was intense and I was beginning to run out of water. I thanked him profusely, then continued my ascent. The Turkish people are known for their kind nature, and I've had the chance to meet many of them on previous trips. I reached the summit where I came across a beautiful desert cat and some pigeons. There, I met an Asian young man who asked to take a photo with me. I didn't know why, but I agreed without hesitation, and then continued on my way. At the top, there was an enormous crowd. Everyone was jostling to visit the cave. I realized then that entering it would be difficult, so I climbed above it, near the beautiful green Saudi flag, and stood watching the scene from above. The people crowding below, and the mountains surrounding Mecca. After a period of reflection, I began descending the mountain, bidding farewell to this sacred place, the place where the message of Islam began. As for Mount Thor, it has a different character. It is always mentioned alongside the story of our noble prophet, peace be upon him, and his companion, Abu Bakr al-Siddiq, hiding in the cave of Thor, away from the eyes of Quraysh. The climb was longer than that of Jabal al-Nur, and much emptier of people, which gave the place a sense of calm and seclusion. I reached the cave, the same cave protected by a spider's web and a dove's nest, after Allah protected our noble messenger. It was a historic moment that makes one reflect on all the risks our prophet, peace be upon him, endured to bring this great religion to the east and west of the earth. I prayed 2 rak'ahs inside the sacred cave, then descended the mountain. I took a taxi from there back to the hotel. The driver was very talkative, as is often the case with most drivers in Arab countries. I discovered he loved Morocco a lot and began talking about the country. I was extremely tired, but I kept up the conversation out of politeness. I simply can't help but listen and smile, no matter how exhausted I am. Sometimes I think taxi drivers in Arab countries are actually undercover agents working for the intelligence services. Their questions always make you feel like you're in an interrogation session, though the only difference is that you do have the right to remain silent and ignore the questions, unlike with the actual intelligence agencies. It seems I had drifted far from the guide, but I finally returned and whispered in his ear that the wind had carried me to Mecca. As we continued our ascent toward the summit of Mount Kinabalu, I was surprised to see a thick, tightly fastened rope secured over a very steep slope. It seemed nearly impossible to walk on it without slipping. I mustered the courage and began advancing slowly, step by cautious step. When I reached the middle, I felt like a hardcore adventurer, the kind you see on National Geographic, ropes wrapped around the body, a sturdy white helmet with a headlamp, standing against nature itself. I took the opportunity and asked one of the climbers to take a photo of me, as if it were a historic moment that demanded instant documentation. Had we stayed still for too long, we would have frozen from the intense cold. The guide quickly snapped a few photos of me using the flash, and we decided to head back down. There was no chance we could remain on the summit any longer. We finally reached the mountain lodge, where we had a quick meal to warm us up after all that effort. Then I climbed into bed and fell into a deep, much-needed sleep. The next day, we passed by the mountain park to collect a certificate, proving I had climbed the mountain. It was a symbolic moment for me, as if I had received a Medal of Honor after a battle with wind and rain. As I held the certificate, I felt a sense of pride, despite the exhaustion still weighing on me. That certificate was more than just a piece of paper. It was a memory of an adventure that would stay with me forever. Mountain climbing is a beautiful hobby, meaningful, challenging, and adventurous for some. You feel as if you're Luffy on his way to find One Piece. For others, it's a needless fatigue. Human interests are diverse, which adds beauty to the world. There is a third category, those who are not mountain lovers and have no interest. Their only interest is to criticize what you do, like saying, "What's the point of that?" Or, "Why bother and exhaust yourself with climbing?" Or, even Capricorns climb mountains, as if mountain enthusiasts don't know that. But what they may not know is that even lions and leopards climb them. The answer to these questions is always, "You're right," as they don't understand someone's passion for something. And even if you climbed Mount Olympus, they would echo the same thing. Every person has his passion in life, so leave a good imprint in it. We will all leave, but we must always keep a dream in mind and work to achieve it, even if it takes a lot of time and effort. I hope you have benefited from this story and climbing journey, and that you continue to enjoy following new journeys and exciting explorations. Thank you for your time and interest.